These are 5 creepy but true stories found on Reddit. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It really helps this channel grow, so I can continue to make more videos just like this. Now, with that said, please enjoy, and sleep well, little demons. When I was a teenager, I was goth. Black hair, black clothes, black makeup, even had a pair of combat boots. My friends and I, in typical goth fashion, hung out at the local cemetery. We started going as a joke, but soon discovered we liked the peace we found there. That all changed one night. My friend called to see if I wanted to hang out, and I did. None of our other friends were available. They were either working or recovering from partying the night before, so we were on our own. My friend picked me up and we drove up to the cemetery. We were hanging out, smoking cigs, and BSing about the latest issues she was having with her boyfriend, when we noticed at the top of the hill we were on, about 100 feet away, a bonfire had been lit. You have to understand that this cemetery is about a block off of campus of a major university, and it's not uncommon for college students to go there to party. My friend and I sighed, knowing that we would have to get going soon. It was illegal to be in the cemetery after dark, and we knew the police would show up because some jerks had decided they needed a bonfire. We decided to finish our cigs and then take off. Just then, the most horrible stench came wafting down the hill from the direction of the bonfire. My friend gagged and covered her mouth. I groaned and said, "What the hell?" My friend shook her head, saying, "I don't know what they're doing. Let's just leave." We get in the car and one of us suggested, I honestly don't remember who, maybe we should just go up and see what they're doing. My stomach turned and a cold shiver went through my body. My friend must have had the same feeling, because at the same time, we both said, "No, we should leave." My friend turned the car on, switched on her headlights, put the car in reverse, and looked over her shoulder before starting to back up. I was still looking up the hill. A figure stepped in front of the bonfire. I could only see a silhouette, but I was sure whoever it was watching us. A feeling of terror hit me, and I said, "Go, go, go," getting louder and more panicked with each word. My friend looked back up the hill for a second, and just as the figure took a step towards us, she slammed on the gas and peeled out, going in reverse down the hill. She rammed the gear shift into drive, and we were out. We didn't say anything for a while until she said, "What the hell were they burning?" I shook my head. I don't know. She dropped me off at home and I went to bed. The next morning, I woke up and went out to the kitchen. My mom was there, drinking her morning coffee, and I joined her. We talked about her job for a bit, when she suddenly asks me, "Did you hear what happened last night?" I shrug and say no. I had just gotten up. She tells me that a woman she worked with was kidnapped from the parking garage. "Oh my God," I say. "Did they find her?" "Yes, but too late," she replies. "Whoever took her had raped her and murdered her. They found her this morning up in the cemetery. He had tried to dispose of her body in a bonfire." I froze. My brain was going a mile a minute, the realization slowly creeping up. That's what that smell was. Needless to say, I never hung out at that cemetery at night again. I think back to our decision to leave instead of investigating the fire. That one decision could have changed everything. Dark silhouette in the bonfire. Let's not meet. One time, I went to a bar with one of my friends. I had just turned 21, so I hadn't been to too many bars up to that point. My friend was drinking on the way to the bar, so he was already pretty drunk when we got there. When I sat at the bar, a cute girl came and talked to me and my friend. She said her name was Candace, and I noticed that she had very, very bright red hair. I assumed she dyed it. It was pretty, but unnatural. Anyways, this girl was flirting with me and my friend. She could tell my friend was already very drunk. To be honest, I played along like I was already drunk too, since it seemed to be working for my friend. I didn't know if she was just trying to get free drinks, so I told her we didn't have much money. She offered to buy us drinks. She kept buying us drinks, and I started to get confused as to who she liked between me and my friend. My friend then went to the bathroom. Before he came back, he was kicked out by the bouncers for being too drunk. Candace and I went outside with him. She kept telling him to go home with her. He was so out of it, he could barely answer her. I told her he was way too drunk and that I couldn't let him go anywhere. I didn't want him to wake up hungover in some random house with no car and no idea what had happened. Candace kept pushing it, saying that she would take care of him, but I told her no, because I had to stay with him. I was more sober than he was, and he was my responsibility. I told her that the only way he was going anywhere was if I tagged along. I assumed she thought I was jealous or cock-blocking, but my friend could barely stand and lost interest in Candace already at that point. She then immediately started flirting with me and offered to get my friend a taxi to drive him home and said we could go to her place alone. I had had a few drinks and was pretty buzzed, so I agreed. We took my friend to the taxi and walked to her car. I slightly stumbled on the way to her car. "Wow, you're pretty drunk, huh?" she said, smiling as she held on to my arm. "Yeah," I said. I don't know why, but I just felt slightly shy and anxious. Everything was just happening too easy for me, so I felt uneasy. We got in her car and drove down the street. "Want to stop at the liquor store and get some more to drink? I'll buy it, so don't worry about paying," she offered. I didn't want to drink any more than I already did. I was already buzzed and wanted to be able to carry myself throughout the rest of the night. Sometimes I made myself look stupid when I'm drunk, so I didn't want to ruin anything with Candace more than I already did earlier by telling her my friend was too drunk. I told her I was already drunk enough, but she insisted. I didn't want to seem lame, so I told her to get me a pint of liquor with some apple juice to chase it. She went into the store and came out with a lot more than just a pint. I assumed she wanted to drink more also, and that's why she got a fifth instead. On the car ride home, we passed the bottle back and forth, but she only took tiny sips. I tried to take tiny sips, but she kept passing me the bottle and telling me to drink. I somehow managed to drink all of my apple juice and pretend to drink the bottle by spitting the liquor into the apple juice bottle. I tossed the apple juice bottle full of liquor out the window before she saw it. I didn't want her to know I was acting drunker than I was. She actually believed I was a sloppy drunk when I was simply buzzed. I took a couple more sips of liquor and then finished the bottle. Throughout the car ride, I called her the wrong name a couple of times to get a reaction out of her. She didn't even react to it. She just kept letting me call her Carla without correcting me. For some reason, I thought she had lied to me about her name initially. We drove up to her house. I pretended to trip and stumble into her front door. She helped me walk inside by holding me up. She opened her front door, which was unlocked. We walked into her house. She closed the front door and then locked it. I thought that was strange, but assumed she didn't want anyone walking in on us. I told her that I needed to use the bathroom. I then walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and looked in the mirror. I just felt strange. I felt like something was off. I felt myself becoming more drunk from finishing the bottle earlier. I turned on the sink to make some noise, and then I made myself puke up the liquor. I flushed and went to the sink and started drinking the tap water out of my hands to sober up. I just didn't want to be drunk, but I still wanted to hook up with Candace, so I wanted to pretend to be drunk. I turned off the sink, and I could hear her talking to someone. "He's drunk as hell. He can barely stand up. You do it." Who is she talking to? And do what? I walked out of the bathroom and into the living room. The moment I stepped into the living room, I saw her walking into another room. All I could see was the back of her head, that very strange bright red hair, go into another room. I didn't see her face or anything. I just saw her kind of walk fast into the room. The living room was pretty dark. "Hey, where are you going?" I slurred like I was drunk. She walked back into the dark living room and up to me. "Let's go into my room," she said. I looked at her bright red hair and then into her eyes. They were different. Her face was different. It was another girl with the same hair. That's when I realized it was another girl with the same wig. It was a wig the whole time. She had changed it with the girl from earlier for whatever reason. My heart felt like it stopped, but I tried to look like I had no idea it was a different girl. I kind of smiled at her and told her I just needed to use the bathroom one more time and told her sorry I was so drunk. She said, "It's fine, just hurry up in there." I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I heard her whisper something to someone again, but this time I think I heard a male voice whisper back. I honestly didn't concentrate on listening to exactly what she said. Something sketchy was going on, and I had to get out of that house. I opened the bathroom window and jumped straight out of it and ran faster than I had ever ran in my life. I did not look behind me or anything. I just ran through the backyard, jumped the fence, ran through someone else's backyard, hit a road, and ran toward the main road. I kept running down the main road until I saw a 24-hour convenience store. I ran into the store and stood straight in front of the camera. I then called a taxi and went home. I tried to think of what happened that night. What was she or they planning that night? Why did she tell me a fake name? Why was she trying to get my friend and I so drunk? I thought maybe a robbery, but she kept spending money on us. She kept buying us drinks and even paid for my friend's taxi cab. And mostly, why did she wear that wig that she gave to another girl? Who was she talking to? What did it mean? And what was in that room they tried to lure me into? The next day after this incident, I went back to the house with a couple of friends just to see what was going on. Nobody was there. No cars, no people, nothing. Just an empty house. I ended up finding out that the house was a summer rental, and whoever those people were, they broke into that house and used it for only that night and never returned. When I was 19, I worked for a company that allocated labor to rural areas of Australia. Basically, what you did was tell them when you were available, and they'd send you to a remote farm for a few weeks where you'd do whatever they needed done. It was hard work and long hours, but good pay and good fun if you got in with a nice group of workers. When this occurred, I was working on a large property. I was told it covered roughly the same landmass as the state of Maryland, USA, about 9 hours from Sydney City, and the property itself was about 40 minutes from the nearest town. In short, it was the middle of nowhere. I was working at the farm, clearing bushland with 3 other guys my age from the city. Our boss was a guy called Jeremy, who owned the farm and supervised us while helping out with the work. He was pretty laid back and was generally really good to us. This summer in particular was very hot, and the work was very hard, so one day, when the temperature hit about 38 degrees Celsius, about 100 Fahrenheit, Jeremy decided to give us the afternoon off. He said he knew of a water hole on the farm about a 25-minute drive north. I was keen for a swim, but the other guys just wanted to relax for the Arvo, so him and I hopped in one of the work trucks and started heading across the property. It was mostly wide, empty expanses with a few clumps of scattered bushland. Jeremy wasn't much of a talker, so we drove more or less in silence. After about 20 minutes, however, he suddenly perked up and jabbed me in the ribs.
Oi, do you see that over there, beneath the 2 dead trees?
I should mention here that, if you're not familiar with the inland areas, particularly those in Australia, they are brown or red and mostly flat and bland, meaning any bright colors stick out like a sore thumb. So you can imagine our surprise when we could see a large blue angular structure far off in the distance. We steered in its direction. As we got closer, we realized it was a huge blue shipping container just sitting in the middle of nowhere. Jeremy was perplexed. I asked him if he knew what it was, but he obviously didn't. He said he hadn't seen it when he drove through the same area about 5 weeks before, and he wanted to go see what it was. As we got closer, things got even more bizarre. There was a big diesel generator behind it thumping away, and a CCTV camera on each side, all motion activated, so they buzzed from side to side, following us as we moved around. I tried to reason with Jeremy, something along the lines of, with all this security, someone obviously doesn't want us here. Let's just go. He brushed me off, however, reminding me it was his farm, and whoever had put this there was trespassing, so he wanted to go inside. Despite all the surveillance, there was only a small padlock on the huge door. We had some bolt cutters in his toolbox, and after a bit of a struggle, we broke the lock and went inside. The first thing I noticed was the rush of cold air as we got in. The place was air-conditioned, which I must admit was quite pleasant on such a hot day. We searched around for a light switch, but I could already see that this was some sort of IT setup. There were flashing LEDs all around the place, and some sort of hum you hear when a hard drive is working hard. When we finally switched on the lights, we could see a sophisticated, albeit somewhat cluttered, office setup. There were hard drives the size of bar fridges and other computer equipment lining the walls, sometimes piled 2 or 3 high, and plastic storage boxes scattered around the far wall, and several desks with computer monitors arranged in the middle, complete with rolling office chairs. At this stage, I felt like I was in one of those nonsensical dreams. This made absolutely no sense. We wandered to the middle and sat down at the desk to see if the computers could give us any idea of what the hell was going on here. My heart was racing, and I just wanted to bolt. We had been seen by the CCTV, so if anyone was monitoring, they already knew we were here. Jeremy, on the other hand, was adamant that we had to get to the bottom of this, so I put on a brave face and started looking through the computer. This went on for a while, but in short, neither of us had a very high grasp of technology outside of Facebook and Microsoft Word. The best I can describe it from my lay position is that it was an endless list of computer talk. It was like the old Napster or LimeWire download screens, just constantly picking up and receiving data, then recording it on several windows. I gave up on the computers and walked cautiously over to the far end of the container to the big pile of storage boxes. By then, I was pretty sure that no one else was there, as there was really nowhere to hide, but I was still incredibly on edge. I decided, against my better judgment, to see what was inside all of these boxes. My brief sift through this box still makes me feel sick to my stomach. It didn't take long for me to realize that this box was full of posters, DVDs, and photos, all of hardcore child you-know-what. The one thing that still gets me is that it was all neatly ordered in the folders and smaller boxes. These people were organized. I immediately recoiled, jumped up, and ran over to Jeremy. I could hardly string a sentence together. I said something to the effect of, "Mate, get out. Kids, go, get the fuck up." I dragged him out, composed myself, and managed to explain what I saw. We jumped back into the truck and sped back to the house. The farm had no mobile phone reception, and we hadn't bought the satellite phone, so we had to get back to the landline to call the police. Once we called them, they still had to make it all the way to the farm from the nearest police station, which was in a town about half an hour away. We waited, talking frantically about what we'd seen, until the cops arrived almost an hour later. They arrived with 2 4-wheel drives, and we jumped in and led them back. This is where it gets worse. By the time we got back, the container door was open, and there was a fire inside. We had only 2 small extinguishers in the car, and these did very little. The fire department took an hour to get there, by which stage most of the damage was already done. An arson report by the federal police found almost no evidence of the computer equipment described, and only traces of paper and cardboard. This means that whoever ran it knew we were there and had time to come and remove most of it and get away. There were various ways to get off the property, and the landmass was huge, so there was no real way to tail them, since the police hadn't taken us all too seriously in the first instance, probably due to our poor explanation on the phone. Aerial surveillance was also impossible by the time we had pieced it all together. I took a keen interest in following it up, but with no real evidence of who might be responsible, the investigation went cold. I've kept in contact with Jeremy, and the shipping container is still sitting on the farm, as it's too expensive to move. I'll never forget what I saw in those boxes. So, now that the case is over and I can finally talk about it freely, I figured I would share my story of the time I got kidnapped. This happened in 2021. I was 20 years old at the time and had just gotten off of work around 11 p.m. and went straight home to get ready to go out and meet my friend at the strip club. A guy messaged me on Facebook Messenger to hang out and smoke, and I told him that I was meeting a friend and didn't want to hang out, so he offered to drive me to and from the strip club, and I agreed. Around 12:30 a.m., he came to pick me up and said that he had to dump some garbage first. He had a couch in the back of his pickup truck, which I assumed was the garbage he was talking about, and he said he made us margaritas, but I told him I didn't want to drink until I got to my destination. So we ended up just smoking marijuana on the way to dump the couch. It was about a 25 to 30 minute car ride to where he wanted to dump this couch, and by the time we made it to the destination, it was about 1:15 a.m. There was a logging road just off to the side of the highway that goes for miles. He pulled all the way down and left the couch at the end of the road, then got back in the truck and started driving back towards the highway. But once we got halfway back to the highway, he stopped and put the truck in park and just pulled out a pipe and started smoking some more marijuana. After taking a hit, he turned his head to me and stared at me for a moment with a weird smirk on his face. Then, all of a sudden, he almost looked like he wanted to jump at me, but stopped himself in the moment with his hands in a motion that was about to grab me. I got scared at this point and was frozen in shock, not knowing if this was a joke or not. I quickly realized that it was not a joke, and I opened my door like I was about to get out, and he did the same. I closed my door and he closed his too. We ended up playing door tag, and eventually he got tired of it and got out of the truck and ran to my side. I was in the passenger seat. He opened my door and tried pulling me out by the legs. I was trying to kick him. I pulled my phone out to quickly call the police, and of course, my Face ID didn't want to work in that moment. He ended up snatching the phone out of my hands. I kicked him hard enough in the chest that he flew backwards, falling to his butt. I grabbed my purse and hopped out of the truck and started running toward the highway. I kept looking back to see how far he was behind me, and although he gave me a head start before running after me, I felt him grab me by the back of my shoulders and forcefully throw me into the ditch. I landed on my stomach with one leg straight out and the other one bent at a weird angle. He sat on top of my legs and butt and was holding my left hand behind my back. I screamed and begged him to bring me home and that I wouldn't tell anyone. He then got upset that I was screaming and tried suffocating me with his other hand while still holding my left hand behind my back. I kept trying to pull his hands off of my face with my right hand because it got to the point where I couldn't breathe. Finally, he let go of my face and I turned my head around to see what he was doing, and to my surprise, I watched him pull out zip ties from his front jean pocket. He zip tied my hands behind my back and tried forcefully pulling my panties off of me. I had on a skirt and was still lying on my stomach. I remember digging my knees into the ground so he couldn't get them off, and he didn't. He got up and started pacing, saying,
"It shouldn't have happened this way. Just do what I say."
I cried, trying to tell him to please just put me back into the truck. I'm not going to go into detail about this part of the story, but what I did notice was he pulled out a really small Ziploc bag from his jean pocket, which contained a condom. He took the condom out of the actual wrapper it came in and put it back into the baggie. I asked him what it was, and he said,
"It's for protection."
After all that went down, he got back into his truck. Mind you, I'm still tied up, and he drove us back to the highway and started driving around. I made up every excuse to get him to take the zip ties off me, but he wouldn't. I asked for a cigarette. I don't even smoke cigarettes, and he lit one for me, smoked on it a bit, and held it up to my mouth, saying,
"I'll hold it for you."
At this point, I thought to myself, what can I do to get myself out of this situation? I thought I was going to die. I started saying things like, "You can be my sugar daddy, and I will pay to take both of us to dinner tomorrow. If sex is all you wanted from me, you could have just said that." This tactic seemed to be working. He loved it so much, he started saying that he would put me on his life insurance policy, so when he dies, I can get his money. Eventually, I asked him again if he would take the zip ties off. They were on so tight, it was cutting off my circulation. He pulled to the side of the road and pulled out a mini pocket knife from his car keys and then cut them off of me. It took a few tries because of how tight they were, and he gave me my phone back. I had an Apple Watch on my wrist and asked him for it, noticing it wasn't on my wrist anymore, and he had this surprised look on his face and shouted,
"We need to go back and get it."
He turned around and headed back to where it all just happened. I got so scared and thought to myself, yep, this is it. I'm going to die tonight, and nobody will know until somebody finds my dead body. Once we got there, he told me to stay in the truck, and he got out and searched the ditch for my watch. He came back to the truck after 5 minutes and said he couldn't find it, but he would be back in the morning to look for it when it's light outside. We got back on the highway and headed back into town. Once we got into town, he asked me,
"What do you want to do now?"
I said, "Bring me to my mom's house. I have to work in 4 hours and I'm tired." It was about 4:30 a.m. by this time, and he complied. After getting to my mom's house, I looked up his name on Google, and he was on parole for first-degree murder. He had served 17 and a half years in prison for murdering somebody for their life insurance policy. I'm 22 years old now, and I am so thankful that I got to see another day. I was subpoenaed to testify against him, and he was found guilty on November 6th, 2023, of all the charges. As of now, he hasn't been sentenced yet. It's been about 10 years since this happened, but I still remember things pretty clearly. I should note that this is told from my perspective, and I wish I could get my mother's perspective on it as well. She just doesn't remember the events as well as I do. For context, I lived in a mid-sized city in the southern United States, where the main thing to do at the time was to go to the mall. Sure, we had movie theaters and a couple of bowling alleys, but besides that, there really wasn't much to the city. My mom worked at a department store located in the mall, and having nothing better to do, I would regularly go and sit in the break room while she worked. It gave me a reason to get out of the house, and if I wanted to, I was allowed to walk around the mall or get something to snack on in the food court. Honestly though, I was shy and preferred to stay cooped up in the break room, playing video games on my Nintendo 3DS. My mom's coworkers were generally very sweet to me and frequently popped in to say hello or just to check on me during downtime. If I was lucky enough to go with my mom on weekends, I could usually convince my mom to pick up my friend. We were actually dating, but since we were both girls, I didn't want that to get out. Going to the mall meant I was free from doing chores at home, and it was a cheap way to sneak a secret date in every now and then. My girlfriend never really liked staying in the break room with me. She always wanted to walk around the mall. I should note that she really enjoyed taking walks, so it wasn't out of the ordinary to want to do so at the mall with me as well. I just didn't like walking as much as she did, so I tried to weasel my way out of it whenever I could. I could usually convince her to just walk over to a nearby store and look around, or go grab something from the food court, rather than walking. But I noticed pretty quickly that she wasn't trying to actually get me to walk around. She just didn't want to be in the break room. Now, my girlfriend was more perceptive to things than I was, and I assumed she just didn't like the ambiance of the break room for some reason. For a little while, I let it go, but eventually, I got frustrated and asked directly what was really bothering her about the break room. I thought she was going to tell me that she was too cramped, or the lights randomly cutting off made her uneasy, the things that bothered me about it too. But no, what she told me was that she heard things in the ceiling, like someone was walking around in there. I had learned from my mother that there was a room in the ceiling, but it wasn't for walking around. It was for maintenance. Most of the stuff in there was wiring and insulation, but technically, someone could go up there. So I told my girlfriend this and said it was likely an employee was up there to fix something. She said that was fine, but she didn't really like it and still preferred walking around or sitting in the food court. I understood her discomfort and wanted to help, so I agreed. We had a really good relationship in the sense of communication, and though I got frustrated, I wanted to make sure she felt comfortable. Later that day, I mentioned what my girlfriend had told me and asked what they were fixing in the ceiling. Though my mom just looked distressed and said they hadn't been up there fixing anything that day, but she wanted me to see something. My mom took me into the receiving room of one of the department stores, which was just a room off in the back, filled with boxes and random junk. the store was going to put out for sale. The layout of the room, though, was sort of an L shape. One part of the L was used for receiving, but the other part was way into the ceiling. I should clarify for this next part that to get into the ceiling, the store would have to call for the mall's maintenance team. They didn't have a ladder or anything on hand to climb it, as it would have been a safety hazard. The only thing that this particular area had was a hatch that led to the ceiling, and that was it. So needless to say, I was horrified to see what appeared to be claw marks leading up the wall to the hatch. I still remember the way they looked. Brown gashes that had been dug into the concrete wall of the receiving room. I asked my mom if it was a prank, but she told me that it wasn't the first time it had happened, and she had no way of knowing I would even ask about it. According to her, these weird carvings had shown up several times over the course of a few months. Each time, the store would call in the mall security and maintenance teams who would clean up the wall and then go into the ceiling to investigate. Nothing had ever come of their searches, and they eventually gave up dealing with the marks. The only explanation mall security could give was that it was likely a homeless individual who had made their way into the ceiling by sheer willpower and happened to be very good at hiding during the searches. I stopped staying at the mall with my mom after that, and any time I wanted my girlfriend to come over, we found somewhere else to go during the day. I didn't feel safe going back to the break room after that. I knew nothing had happened up until that point, but I just didn't want to risk it. So, to whoever or whatever was walking around in the ceiling at my mom's workplace, let's not meet